The human species is an incredibly violent species. And because I recognize that, we make a conscious, tactical decision to not injure anybody. It's not in the interest of our clients.
Oh, no. Oh, my God. Oh.
And our clients are whales and dolphins and the fish in the oceans. It's not in their interest for us to hurt anybody.
Oh, there's definitely smoke coming out of there.
Gotta find it.
Is it?
There it is.
Oriental bluebird, this is a filing mode in accordance with the United Nations World Charter for Nature. I'm instructing you to leave this whale sanctuary. You're unlawfully killing whales. You're in violation of international conservation regulations. Remove yourself from these waters. Go back to Japan. Maybe they'll get the idea that it's not healthy to hang around here and go up and leave, you know.
To many people, Paul Watson is simply a dangerous criminal, a pirate on the high seas.
But I would never deny that I'm a violent person, because we're all violent people. Just look at our history. I hope to persuade readers of this book of something already known to the pirate whalers of Norway, the dolphin killers of Japan, the outlaw drift netters of Taiwan, and the pilot whale killers of the Faroe Islands, that the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society is the most aggressive, no-nonsense, and determined conservation organization in the world.
You've been described as vigilantes with no respect for the law. How far are you prepared to go?
How far are we prepared to go? I mean, we really should be asking how far our government's going to let us be doing this, because they're not doing their job. You only have vigilantes when there's an absence of law.
While Japanese whalers hunt their prey in Antarctic waters, for weeks conservation groups have been chasing the Japanese whalers.
Paul Watson and his Sea Shepherd Society.
Paul Watson and his kayak crew.
Paul Watson, the man who fought the East Coast seal hunt.
Paul Watson has declared war on the drift net fleet.
Paul Watson.
Paul Watson.
Paul Watson.
Captain Paul Watson.
The bad boy of the Canadian environmental movement.
This device we call the mother of can openers.
I'll go to prison for as long as it takes.
These are a bunch of money-sucking manipulators.
Do you place yourself above the Canadian law?
Obviously, we're getting people annoyed, and if we're getting people annoyed, we're doing something right.
He's a professional radical ecologist, and there aren't that many around like that.
I've always actually seen him as what you'd call the Rambo of the environmental movement.
He caused quite a stir, and he continues to do so. He's one of my heroes.
I've been involved in a war to save the whales now since 1974, so it's been well over 3 decades. We fought it off the coast of Norway, on the beaches of Siberia, in Nia Bay in Washington, down in Antarctica, on the shores of Japan, in Australia, Portugal, Spain, South Africa. I mean, we fought, it's a world war, really, to save the whales.
Shoes on. Felipe, shoes on.
Who's going to be my Zodiac crew?
I know the priority,
Just
and I'm trying.
Just appoint the person. That's all I'm asking you to do.
I don't know who's going to be, because we got about 12 Zodiac drivers walking around here. You got to realize I got a ton of things that needs to be done here, okay? We believe that we can actually make a difference by being on the ship. by intervening with illegal poaching, illegal whaling, illegal fishing. This ship is pretty much the only organization that does anything about it.
Our objective on this campaign is to search out the Japanese whaling fleet, which is breaking numerous international agreements and treaties. So we're not going down there to protest what they're doing, we're going down there to stop what they're doing.
I want what I do in this life to actually have changed something or made some kind of positive evolution for the planet, some kind of positive stance for the environment's survival.
I wanted my 6-year-old boy to grow up and enjoy whales firsthand instead of what they used to look like through pictures and videos. This is a really important mission.
This entire area around Antarctica is a whale sanctuary, so nobody should even be killing the whales there. So we'll patrol for about 4 weeks or so. The whales like to hang out about 100 miles off the coast because the krill population is highest there.
I mean, it's very clear that the only reason to go down there is to get whale meat on high-scale restaurant tables. So I think what we're seeing is a resumption to full-scale commercial whaling of the size that we saw in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Japan's whaling fleet, by permission of General MacArthur's administration, is on the move again in the Antarctic. England, Norway, and Australia have protested, but American officials consider it an economic necessity.
They've been whaling down in Antarctica since 1946, but since 1986 they've been whaling illegally in violation of the global moratorium.
Japan is using a loophole in the International Convention on the Regulation of Whaling, arguing that they are undertaking science in the waters around Antarctica. In effect, what they are doing is they are killing almost 1,000 whales and they are selling the meat in Japan, claiming that they are doing that in order to support their science. But as scientists from countries around the world have shown time and again, you don't need to kill whales to study them.
The one thing that they are pushing, that they're saying that whales are eating up all the world's fish, which is just laughable since most whales eat krill. They've been increasing the number of whales they've been taking. Last year they took 10 fin whales for the first time, and then this year they targeted humpback whales for the first time. Humpback whales and fin whales are on the endangered species list. Killing them is a violation of the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species.
More than 80% of the world's whales travel through the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary at some point during the year. It's a key area for all the great whales, and that is why the international community established it as a whale sanctuary. For Greenpeace, whales are an iconic species. They were the first example of industrial overfishing across our oceans.
When Paul and a group of people started Greenpeace 40 years ago or now in the 60s and late 70s, we began a movement we were hoping that would slow down the ecological destruction of the planet.
Vancouver was like a mecca for the youth culture at that time, and the streets were teeming with young people. Paul Watson and myself and Bob Hunter and a lot of the early environmental activists, we just hung out together on the street and met each other at rallies. I know we used to go to peace rallies all the time.
It was really Bob Hunter was the catalyst for bringing this all together. He felt that there was the makings of a movement, and that's what he was guiding it towards. One of the early meetings, when somebody was leaving, they flashed a peace sign, and Bill Darnell, he said, "Well, make it a Greenpeace."
And so in that sense, the word Greenpeace symbolized bringing those two, what till then had been very distinct movements, the peace movement, which was the pacifist, anti-war, Gandhian side of things, and the newly emerging environmental movement, which was based on ecology and an understanding of how all life on Earth is interrelated and interdependent with each other.
Paul was probably one of the younger people involved in Greenpeace in the very early days, But Paul was kind of the radical among the radicals. He was always the person who would go the farthest, be the most outrageous, and he sort of had this reputation. In about 1973, Paul Spong approached Greenpeace. Now, Paul had been a neurologist and biologist, and he had been hired to study the first captive orca ever held in captivity anywhere in the world.
It was a job that sounded interesting. Behavioral research with a whale that had just been captured and was in the Vancouver Aquarium.
Paul went into this series of experiments with the whale and found that it learned faster than anything he'd ever heard about before in the literature. I mean, it picked up immediately. And then all of a sudden, the whale switched to giving the exact wrong answer. And Paul realized that the whale was experimenting on him and playing with his mind.
The whale was far more intelligent than he or other scientists had believed, and in fact felt that the whale itself was trying to communicate with him.
Well, before you know it, Paul was sticking his head in the whale's mouth and bringing musicians down for full moon serenades. Apparently there were some substances involved. The point is that during Paul's tenure at the aquarium, he had found out about how the great whales were being slaughtered nearly to extinction out in the sea.
It surfaced in the form of a Canadian author, Farley Mowat, who wrote a book called A Whale for the Killing.
And Farley Mowat convinced Paul Spong and the rest of us that the whaling issue was a huge and important issue because the whales were being hunted to extinction.
A whale's been spotted and the harpoon gunner gets set. Ready, aim, fire. End of Moby Dick.
Throughout the history of whaling, you have one ocean after another, one species after another that's been targeted.
A special flag marks his carcass as the whalers go after another monster.
First, the largest of them that were targeted, the blue whales, which went down, I think, to perhaps 1% of their original population before they stopped being targeted.
The whale hunt will help alleviate Japan's food shortage and ultimately save over $20 million for American taxpayers.
Representatives of 14 whaling nations formed the International Whaling Commission in 1946 to regulate the orderly development of the whaling industry.
But it was like having the wolves guard the sheep. You know, the International Whaling Commission was made up of the countries that were killing the whales. The Atlantic gray whale was already extinct and other whales were on the brink of extinction, and if human society didn't do something, we were just going to wipe out the whales.
So something had to be done.
Paul Spong had come to Bob Hunter with an idea that we should do something about whales, and I jumped onto that right away and said, yeah, absolutely.
Do the Greenpeace thing with the whalers, the same thing you guys do sailing into nuclear test zones. Why don't we do that with the whales? The whales were also such a beautiful image of nature. And we believed that because they're huge and they're kind of mythic and would inspire people, that the whales would be the perfect image for people to begin to understand the importance of protecting the environment.
That was the beginning of the Greenpeace Save the Whales voyage, which then Bob Hunter took up as the leader.
So we decided what we needed was a workable plan. And the only workable plan we were able to come up with was to take a boat and go right out in the ocean, find a whaling fleet. And we have 3 inflatables with outboards on them, which can go faster than the chaser boats. So, and as it closes in for the kill, one of our boats moves into position right behind the whale so they can't get a shot at it. And we've talked to whalers, and they said if we can succeed in doing that, it will definitely throw a monkey wrench into their operation.
But we needed people who could pilot one of these Zodiacs. And Bob Hunter had asked Paul Watson, because he knew Paul Watson was the sort of person that would take risks.
I was in the Coast Guard at the time, and, you know, we use these Zodiacs and we can, you know, interfere with them, get between the harpoons and the whales.
That was one thing about the early Greenpeace campaigns that was sort of magical, is people just seemed to show up out of nowhere with the skills we needed. So they weren't all just activists. It wasn't just a bunch of hippies. It was professionals, people with real skills that came together and wanted to do something. So we set out to go out and find the whalers. It was certainly the first Greenpeace environmental action, and it really was an action that launched the modern environmental movement.
3 cheers for Greenpeace. Ready?
Well, this has been a very good city for support.
We got this patch and we got this boomerang from the Aboriginals here outside of Melbourne, just to make sure that we come back.
Oh, this was going to help us find the Japanese, no doubt about it.
Very exciting, and I think we have a chance now.
Yeah, it feels like it.
You just look at that man, and he's dedicated. He's not only dedicated to that helicopter, but he's dedicated to our cause. Awesome. And thank you so much for us in the whales.
Allison, she's probably one of the most committed and dedicated and passionate animal defenders I've ever met. And very, very much an animal person, not a people person, which is attractive to me.
Where are they? Did you see them?
Dolphins! Oh, yeah!
Well, Paul's big thing is, that he cares for the whales and the dolphins. He really does. That's his big thing.
Like almost right in front of us.
What kind of whale is it?
I don't know. I can't tell.
The whales, he would say, is the most intelligent species on this planet, and it's true. They have 4 lobes to the brain. They have an incredible amount of intelligence that we just can't even understand. We're always trying to find other intelligence by, taking a rocket up to the moon when the most intelligent species is here, right here. Why can't we figure that out? So his drive is to protect them while they're here, because we're annihilating them, we're slaughtering them, and there's not going to be any left.
He likes whale watching. He's done it for 30 years, so. Well, he doesn't get as excited as we do, I don't think, Where when we see dolphins, we all run out, and he calls them dolphasms that we have, because we're all so excited. I think he gets a little excited inside. Doesn't show anything outwardly. I had a girlfriend that was involved with one of his crewmates, and she was always talking about Sea Shepherd. It was in the paper, I'm reading, and I said, I'm going to marry this man. This is my guy. And so I remember being with all my activist friends and saying, yeah, one of these days I'm going to marry Paul Watson, and they'd be like, oh, okay, Allison, yeah. So then we met, and I introduced myself. I said, Paul Watson, my name is Allison Lance, and I've always wanted to marry you. And Paul just kind of standing there looking at me.
Wow. It was like this, yes.
Got married near Los Angeles Airport. Real quick marriage, went in, justice of the peace, in and out like $123 later. And Paul said, for that kind of money, damn it, we're going to stay married. He had a couple other wives before me, and for many years, he just was an absentee father. He wasn't around.
I guess my mom, I don't know if she was naive when I was born, but I guess she maybe thought that my dad would change or he would want to stay at home. And he really didn't. He was out the next year when I was 1 year old on another campaign.
I didn't see really why I had to change and sacrifice all my beliefs just because she got pregnant. And I wasn't going to do that.
But that's Paul. Does Paul love his daughter? Absolutely.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I think my dad's pretty lucky that he's got the blood bond between him and I, because at some points in my life, I think that's all that really held us together. I think I've, on average, seen him maybe 3 or 4 times a year since I was really, really little. He puts others before him that aren't able to defend themselves. Others being animals. I think my mom actually was the one who said to me, you can make a choice. Like, it's your choice. You either choose to accept the way he is, the way he lives, and just deal with it. And get out of it what you can.
I think in order to have a successful relationship with Paul, you work with Paul on and off the ship.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting a little seasick. I have my bucket, but because I'm on bridge, you have to stick with your shifts. But in other positions like deckhand, if you're sick, you're allowed to go away. But on bridge, you can't miss any shifts. So you have to sit here with your bucket, and you have to be sick, but you have to still stay here. So I'm sticking it in, I'm grilling it in, and hopefully I will adapt within the next couple days.
It's going to get a lot worse in about 4 or 5 days.
Looks like it's going to be another 2-3 days until we hit the ice pack. And then we're just going to go east, past the coast, looking for Japanese. Send the helicopter off and see if they can find them. If they can't find them, then we'll probably relocate the vessel and do it again.
Now, of course, when we started, we had no idea where to go. We had no idea where to find them. Where do you find whalers? Well, I don't know. We asked around. We asked the old sea captain, John Cormack, well, where do you find whalers? And, well, I don't know. He says they'll probably be at the seamounts. Well, there's seamounts over 6 million square miles of the ocean.
It was a real needle in a haystack. We didn't have any up-to-date information on where they would be.
Originally, Bob was trying to use the I Ching and everything else to find them. But actually, the Russian trawlers used to fish 13 miles off the coast of Canada and the U.S., and they used to whale out there at the same time.
So we figured, well, best chance to find them is to go where they went last year at the same time they were there. They might be there.
We were able to point to a spot in the North Pacific off the coast of California where the Russian fleet was likely to be.
So we headed off to Mendocino Ridge. Fortunately, we started hearing Russians on the radio. We heard Russian voices.
I actually saw them for the first time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over there. There's 1 by the Vostok, and there's 3 over here. There's 9 chasers altogether.
Okay, all hands on deck. 12:20. John has just spotted 2 flags in the water, which probably means whales that have been hit.
What they do is they kill a whole pod of whales and just leave them behind and then come back and collect them all later.
And the first whale we came across was an undersized whale, so we knew that it was an infant whale, illegal.
So let's get a Zodiac and circle around this whale and get some shots.
Zodiac,
on, quick.
And one of Paul's first famous acts was that he immediately got down into a Zodiac, went over to the whale, and sat on it so that we could take a picture showing his size versus the whale's size.
What do you say, Paul? How long do you think it is? How long? 18 feet.
And that became a case before the International Whaling Commission. That photograph of Paul on the whale is a fairly famous one in Greenpeace archives.
Well, it was sad. I mean, there was a harpoon lower in the back, and the blood was coming through, so the blood was coming on my hands. And it was very recently killed because it was very warm.
We had never seen anything like this in our lives.
Maybe we can turn ours on. Doesn't look like much of a boat.
You know, most of us had this old sort of Moby Dick idea of what whaling was, brave little men in these little boats and these big, huge Leviathan whales. But it was the opposite. It was the reverse. It was the whaling ships that were huge, metal, steel-hulled killer boats with the cannons on the front and these 250-pound exploding harpoons, and the stench was horrible, and there were sharks cutting through the water, and there was a pipe that was coming out the side of the factory ship, and blood was just constantly pouring out into the water from the flensing deck. It was just a grotesque scene. You know, all of this time we've been having this love affair with whales, beautiful creatures of the sea, and we come upon this absolute slaughter. It was like walking into a battlefield. The first whale that was killed was a smaller female whale. Now, we understood later that they do this on purpose, because if they kill a small female whale and haul it in, then the other whales will come to their defense, and then they kill them point blank.
So Bob and I got into a boat and, you know, did what we were training to do.
Paul gets Bob Hunter right in front of the whaling boat, exactly how we had envisioned it. This was it. This is our whole plan.
And people think, you know, they have this euphemism for a harpoon. They kill the whales with a harpoon. Well, a harpoon is a 250-pound flying bomb with a steel cable. And so getting hit by the harpoon would be one danger, but if the harpoon missed you, that cable is going to slice down when it goes taut, and that would, you know, cut the Zodiac in half. And most people would be kind of a little concerned about that, but Paul, it's the last thing on his mind.
No, they just shot anyway. You know, so that was, we were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, so found very fast that Gandhi wasn't going to work with the Russian whalers.
And all of a sudden, just explosion. It was like the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was like somebody shot a gun off right by my ear.
And then the whale was hit. I heard the harpoon exploding inside her. Cable came slashing down in the water, just missing us by about 4 feet.
There's blood and guts all over the place. There's this whale who's spewing, you know, bloody water out of its blowhole, and other whales are diving, and it's absolute chaos.
The largest whale in the pod suddenly rose up and then slapped the water with his tail real hard and disappeared. And we'd been told by all the so-called experts that it would attack us, and so we were sitting in these little rubber boats, you know, with a great deal of anxiety, waiting for this whale to come up underneath of us. Suddenly, the ocean just erupted behind us, and I turned in time to see him hurl himself straight at the harpooner.
And he just tipped the cannon right down point blank and blasted.
And then he dove, and I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight towards our inflatable real fast.
This bull sperm whale came up beside the boat where Paul Watson was, and this sperm whale just sort of rose out of the water, and it was dying.
And the next move was to come. He would have fell right on top of us. And as I could see him as he was coming down on us, I looked up into his eye.
Here we were all just looking into this huge eye of this dying whale. And I have to tell you, at that moment, we were all just transfixed.
I looked up past these 6-inch teeth into an eye the size of my fist. And what I saw there was understanding, that the whale understood what we were trying to do. Because he could have very easily come forward and crushed us or seized us in his jaws and killed us. Instead, what he did was slowly slide back into the water, eye-to-eye contact all the way, and went beneath the waves and died. That whole incident happened so fast. I mean, it was really, you're almost in a state of shock watching it all happen. And there's so much agony, coming from the whales, so much blood in the water, and so it was a pretty chaotic scene at the time. But certainly, when I looked into the eye of that whale, it was almost like stopping time, really. That was all very, very intense.
I talked to Paul a bit afterwards. I think we were all moved by that moment, and I think that with Paul, I think it probably did really cement for him that he wanted, this was his mission in life, to protect these animals.
Well, yeah, because, this is a point where, the whale had saved our lives, and I felt personally indebted to him. And at the same time, it gave me pause for reflection. Well, why are the Russians killing these whales? They don't eat whale meat, but they use the spermaceti oil as a high heat-resistant lubricating oil. And one of the products that they were making with it was intercontinental ballistic missiles. So I said, here we are destroying this intelligent, gentle, socially complex creature for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it just struck me that we're insane. So I said, I can't work, or do what I do for people anymore. We're crazy. So I'll do everything I can to protect whales and their kind and the other beings in the ocean, but not for people, but for them.
When we came into San Francisco the next day, that footage went around the world. It was like top of the news on all 3 U.S. national networks, and just put Greenpeace on the map like it had never been before. We'd been kind of a bit of a fringy peace anti-bomb group up till then, but now we were in the world forefront Save the Whales movement, and the rest is history.
George, could you explain the incident when the Russians fired the harpoon over your head?
There's 4 elements of media. In every story, you have to have one of the 4, and the more you have, the better the story. So those 4 elements are sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. So, of course, that whale story gave us the violence of them shooting at the whales and shooting at us. It's not a news story to say, oh, they're out there killing whales, and, the average journalist says, yeah, well, so, big deal. But if you go out there and risk your life, and harpoons are being fired, and, there's blood in the water and everything, then you got yourself a story, then you can talk about it. Bob once said, if it takes standing our heads and doing silly, stupid tricks to get their attention, that's what we'll do. But you tag the message along with it.
Well, this is part of a campaign to get the International Whaling Commission to dissolve itself and come under the control of the United Nations.
Bob Hunter was somewhat of a mentor for Paul Watson. He was older. He was an established journalist. He had written a book called Storming of the Mind, which outlined his media theories and understanding of how to use the media to change society. And he was a pioneer in that regard.
Greenpeace was the first organization to understand that we live in a media culture. In fact, Greenpeace was founded by journalists and broadcasters. I intend to change the world. I believe, with Margaret Mead, that any single person can make a difference if he allows his passion to be expressed through action. My passion is the living earth, especially her oceans. I'm a conservationist, a protector of species and ecological systems, and a defender of the rights of nature. Well, we posted a $10,000 reward for anybody who can provide coordinates that'll help lead us to the Japanese fleet. The last time we were down in Antarctica, we didn't have any aerial reconnaissance ability, so it's simple for them to elude us. You know, you really need to have either access to satellite imagery or good aerial reconnaissance or some tip-off on coordinates in order to find them, because you're talking about an area about 200 miles wide by about 3,000 miles long.
I mean, this expanse of ocean north of Young Island is just absolutely nothing but ice. I mean, man, it is so bloody thick right there, you wouldn't believe it. Okay. It's just wall-to-wall pack ice.
Well, here we go. The sea between Bellany Islands and the Antarctic mainland is frequently impenetrable due to heavy ice.
We'll keep looking.
Paul Watson, freelance writer, ex-sailor, a longtime dedicated member of the Greenpeace Foundation. He and his companions are in bizarre rehearsal for their next grand adventure.
During the '75 whale campaign with Greenpeace, I said that one thing that I'd always wanted to do is to oppose the seal hunt in Canada and get Greenpeace involved.
It's the blackest mark on the whole Canadian national identity. I mean, people all over the world know about Canada's seal slaughter.
Well, I first saw a seal killed when I was 11 in New Brunswick, on the shores of New Brunswick, which was a pretty traumatic experience, you know. And so I always felt that I wanted to do something to stop that.
Paul single-handedly pretty much started our protest against the culling of the baby seals in Newfoundland.
So I decided to set up a base camp, and we went out to physically block the sealers on the ice.
I'm not proud of it, no. When you gotta do it,
What are you gonna do in 5 years when there's nothing left? Then you go wipe something else out, eh?
Pardon?
You go wipe something else out.
Get down a living, boy. They can make it yours.
Yeah, but you're gonna be out of a living in 5 years if you do that.
I don't agree that it's acceptable to wade into the nursing colony of a wild marine mammal and bludgeon all the young to death in front of their mothers. You know, the seal hunt to me was something that was an anachronism. Maybe 100 years ago people had to do that to survive, but you don't have to do that to survive anymore. And so I felt that had to be ended, and I know Paul did too.
Blocking the boat.
Bob and I stood in front of an ice-breaking sealing boat to stop it from continuing forward to kill seals.
It was coming right through the ice and would certainly have killed them if it hadn't stopped.
We're not letting them come through.
Backed up 3 times and came forward already. Trying to bluff us off.
No, he might just be lining up for a big one.
We held our ground, and they did stop.
Well, lo and behold, it was a great success. And then there were people back in Greenpeace Central who wanted to control it and take over, and they did try to control it.
Bob asked me if I would go as sort of the representative of Greenpeace to Newfoundland to sort of be there while Paul was leading this expedition, because frankly, we all knew that Paul was a bit of a loose cannon on deck. We got back there, and it turned out that Paul had completely botched the organization of this thing. We had these 80 journalists that he'd brought over from Europe who all wanted to get out to the ice, and there was no way of getting them there because we only had 2 helicopters. And we were weathered in half the time by blizzards. Then Brigitte Bardot arrived, and total pandemonium broke loose. Her people tried to steal our helicopters, so now we really didn't have any way of getting anybody anywhere.
C'est un carnage, c'est une tuerie. Il reste la banquise est rouge de sang et le monde entier est écœuré. Il y a des manifestations partout, à Londres, en Italie, en Allemagne, en France, pour dire Canadiens assassins.
And the point is it was quite a fiasco.
Well, I think our triumph there was really getting her on the ice, getting pictures taken. Having Brigitte Bardot there drew international media attention. You know, for every demonstrator there or protester, there was probably 10 journalists. So it was a media circus, really. And the Canadian government just fell right into it. I mean, they didn't know how to react except to make themselves look foolish. You know, it guaranteed us the cover of Paris Match and Bunta and Stern and almost every major magazine in the world. Get a picture of Brigitte Bardot posing cheek to cheek with a baby seal was guaranteed news coverage. Again, that's the other element. Sex and celebrity entered into this. So now you have sex, celebrity, and violence from the killing of the seals.
And then Paul decided that the tactics of Greenpeace weren't good enough for him, and sort of unilaterally did this thing of chaining himself to this cable that was dragging the pelts across the ice.
The sealers decided that they were going to deal with me, and they gave the order to pull the winch line in. I was dragged across the ice, through the water, up the side of the ship, and dropped 3 times back into the water. I spent about 10 minutes in the water altogether, and I was losing all sensation in my hands and feet.
Peter Ballum, who was there as the lawyer, ended up having to rescue Paul and jump into the freezing water with him, and he could have died.
Then I was dragged out, brought on board the ship, and dragged through a gauntlet of sealers who were kicking me, spitting at me, and rubbing my face into the blood on the deck.
The Newfoundlanders responded with all this hostility and everything, which was perfect. So because of their reaction to us, it made it a major story.
Take direct to the hospital. Direct to the hospital. Okay, put him in. Get there, man. Take him to the hospital. Authority, we can take him. I'll do something. Those guys trying to kill me. I have no authority. I don't care if you have no authority. Do something. What the hell are you? Okay, let's put him in there. Are you? Okay, Paul? I can't really move. And get our helicopter's permission to land here right away.
So it was a type of thing where at the end of it all, it was clear that Paul was like out of control. I mean, we were supposed to be working as a team, and whoever was out there on the ice floes representing Greenpeace was supposed to do it like we had agreed to do it, which is non-violent civil disobedience type tactics.
And Paul did the terrible violent act of taking a club from a sealer and throwing it down a hole.
Well, I walked up to a sealer, and he was about to kill a seal, and I grabbed his wrist and pulled the club out of his hand and tossed it into the water. That's what I thought I was there to do, was to save seals. Didn't hurt the guy, and then just walked away. I think I made some comment about he must be a Newfoundlander because the price tag was still on the outside of his sunglasses.
Now, I understand the emotionalism behind that and why you would feel like you should, grab all their clubs and throw them in the water. But that is not how Greenpeace operates.
I'm going to stay with this pup until I get a promise from the fisheries people that this one pup will be spared.
There's one thing I realized about pacifism early on, is that pacifism is not just about not dealing the first blow. It's also about not causing the other person to want to hit you and kill you.
I'll come with you peacefully if I am removed. Sir, it has to be this gray seal.
Greenpeace is based on a non-violent philosophy, and it's based on the Quaker system. You go to the area of trouble or where the atrocity is, and you bear witness.
Well, bearing witness to me, it means nothing. It's just like you're just a witness to an atrocity. How is that stopping anything? It can hardly be called non-violence. You're just allowing the violence to continue by doing nothing. I don't believe in protest either. I don't like protesting. Protesting is a very submissive thing. It's like, please, please, please don't kill the whales. I mean, you don't walk down the street and see a woman being raped and do nothing. You don't see a child being molested and do nothing. You don't see a kitten being stomped and do nothing. And you don't sit there and watch a whale die and take its picture and do nothing. I mean, that's just cowardice. And they can call it bearing witness or all they want, but as far as I'm concerned, they're just afraid to do anything.
You can't violate these ethical things slightly. If you violate them, then you no longer can claim to be nonviolent, right? And it was something that was important to us.
There's no compromise. It's kind of a, no compromise for Paul. None of the bureaucracy. Enough with the meetings and all that.
I thought Paul had to go. Bob could see that it was really a choice between myself and Paul Watson who would succeed him as president of the Greenpeace Foundation, and he felt that I was a better candidate.
Well, and then when he became president in June of '77, he made good on his promise to have me thrown out of the organization.
And it was really just egos. It was about authority and control and who got to be in charge.
Paul was voted off the board of Greenpeace Foundation by a vote of 11-1, him being the one. Now, he has his own story about what happened, and he likes to think that he left Greenpeace voluntarily.
I was actually never kicked out of Greenpeace. I could have stayed with Greenpeace. I was just voted off the board.
He was kicked out because he was removed from the board of Greenpeace. But I think he also left on his own volition because he wanted to do things that Greenpeace wouldn't do. So, unfortunately, history is never quite as neat as we would like it to be. But so I suppose it depends on who you talk to.
Now I'm really pissed at Greenpeace. They specifically will not put the position where they found the fleet on the website, and they said that we're doing this so that Sea Shepherd doesn't get the information.
You've got Greenpeace and Paul Watson both going down to the Antarctic to confront the Japanese whaling fleet, and they end up bickering. I mean, how counterproductive is that? They should at least be cooperating in communications, in helping each other find the fleet.
If we had their resources in their ships, oh my gosh, look at how we operate. Everything's like duct taped and held together, just jerry-rigged.
Bailing wire?
I know.
Do that?
Just
hold on.
And they also have they built a $60 million office in Hamburg, Germany. Our office is on our property.
They're not doing anything. They're taking pictures and hanging banners, It's what they've done for 10 years. Then they wonder why the media doesn't pick up on it. They don't seem to ever caught the lessons from the early Greenpeace days that you got to come up with a new and imaginative tactic every time. But we've always gotten along with the crew on board the vessels. It's just the bureaucrats and the head offices in Greenpeace that we have a problem with. I guess they're quoted in the newspaper today as saying that Sea Shepherd doesn't meet their threshold on what they consider nonviolence.
For me, I always kind of saw Paul and my dad as kind of the yin-yang version of each other. They both had the same spirit, that leadership spirit, wanting to do great things for this planet. My father was very much into the Gandhian Quaker belief. He wanted to create peace with all his brothers and sisters and everybody around him. Whereas Paul, some could argue, is very much the opposite. He does create enemies. A lot of people in the world are his enemies, and he doesn't actually care, which is, personally, I think, a quality of Paul's.
Bob Hunter had this great quality of being able to overlook people's weaknesses and encourage them in their strengths. And I think that he saw in Paul Watson a lot of good qualities, and he may have seen things in Paul that he wished were different. I don't know, but he didn't dwell on that.
Really, if it wasn't for Bob Hunter, there'd be no Greenpeace Foundation today. It would have sort of just died out in '73 or '74. Wouldn't have gone anywhere. He's a visionary. He actually looked on Greenpeace almost as a religion in a way, and he wanted to create a new religion. He thought that the salvation of the planet was to create a green religion.
But back then, I'd understood Paul was the guy who was going to carry on one way or another, and if I got wiped out, Paul would carry on. And I actually always had that sense about him, that he wasn't going to let go. He's sort of like he's the pit bull terrier of the ecology movement.
You know, he died quite young, I thought, so that was a tragedy.
Pretty much my whole life has been changed since then. A lot of my innocence and childhood ideals and romantic notions have pretty much died the day that he died.
Yeah, I think it was pretty devastating for a lot of people in the movement, and you know, because he was quite a figurehead and that. So.
I had brought some of my father's ashes to Paul, so Paul could spread on a campaign, and that would be their last campaign together as eco-warrior brothers. And Paul decided that he'd rather have me spread them and that he'd be there. So he took me up on the helicopter.
Well, it's working real good. You know, I went up with Emily Hunter and we spread Bob's ashes on top of a giant iceberg. So I've never stood on a tabletop iceberg before. It's pretty amazing.
Along the way, we actually saw blue whales, and it was the most amazing sight I've ever seen in my life. And it was a beautiful, beautiful blue sky day, and the sun was shining. I just needed a rainbow at that moment. It was pretty perfect. And we went over to this iceberg. We declared it the Bob iceberg. We imprinted Bob with our footprints in the snow. I got to spread my father's ashes and read a little poem, and Paul was there as well, so. The both of us jerked a little tear, but it was a pretty significant moment. It was his last campaign, and I got to share it with him on my first anti-whaling campaign, and Paul got to share it, so it was incredible.
We have achieved some tremendous successes over the last year. We have
Paul Watson was one of the founding members of Greenpeace. Now he's the top man in his own international environment group.
As the quality of the environment deteriorates, then people are going to get violent.
The divorce of Paul Watson from Greenpeace was a little bit messy, but I think in the end, in fact, it was exactly the right thing to happen. Paul really needed to have an organization that he could be in charge of. He liked to be in charge, and Paul went off and started the Sea Shepherd Society, and he got his own boat, filled the bow of the boat with cement, called it the Sea Shepherd, and went out and he rammed the Sierra, the worst offender of all of the pirate whalers, and just rammed him.
Well, I knew about the Sierra for years. It was operating since the early 60s under various flags, and killed a lot of humpbacks off of the Bahamas. Then it was killing whales off of Senegal, and then it was off of Somalia. It killed about 25,000 whales in its history, and it was totally illegal.
What could we do against a pirate whaler? They didn't care if we exposed them. They were just a numbered company somewhere, and it was very hard to track down the real owners and who was behind it. There was no way that they could be embarrassed. We could embarrass Japan or Russia, but these pirate whalers, we were kind of impotent against them.
Caught them 200 miles off the northern coast of Portugal. I went to my crew, there was 20 of us all together, and I said, look, I can't say you're not going to get injured, but I can guarantee you're going to go to jail in Portugal, because we're going to go out there and ram that vessel in the harbor. But I'm not going to force anybody to do anything they don't want to do, so if you don't want to do it, then you got 10 minutes to pack your bags and get off the ship. 10 minutes later, 17 of them were off the boat there. Only had 2 others, but fortunately they're both engineers. So we let the ropes go and steamed out. I struck the Sierra at full speed across the bow to damage the harpoon. Came around the stern at 360 degrees and slammed into them at 15 knots on the port side. The captain was trying to shoot at me. He had a rifle, but nothing hit. Split them open to the waterline. About 2 hours later, a Portuguese Navy ship was on our tail and threatened to fire at us, and I made the mistake of agreeing to them. They wouldn't have fired, I'm sure, but anyway, I learned my lesson on that, and I went back with them, and then I was charged with gross criminal negligence, but When I told the port captain there wasn't anything negligent about what I did, I hit him exactly where I wanted to hit him, and he said, well, I can't find who owns this boat. Until I do, you're free to go. So
the Sierra managed to struggle into harbour. Months later, saboteurs placed a limpet mine on the Sierra's hull, finishing the job that Watson had started.
You know, one of my crew members said, when I get out here, he said, well, if I knew you were going to get away with it, I would have been there too. But sometimes you got to do things knowing that you're not going to get away with it. It was a very satisfying experience, knowing that we had ended the career of that ship. You know, I was quite happy about it for some time.
I think it's pretty clear that the ramming of the Sierra was Paul's pinnacle. And that's why I think he has to claim that he's sunk and rammed all these other boats, when in fact that's the only really serious ramming that he did. And it was a pirate whaling vessel, and so a lot of people agreed with that.
We ran Paul's story as a cover story in the Greenpeace Chronicles. So there was more than just a tacit support, because he was willing to do things that as an absolutely nonviolent organization we weren't prepared to do. You know, you could say that Paul's action was necessary in order to stop the slaughter of the whales.
All heroes have enemies. The greater the hero, the greater, stronger, and more numerous the enemies. I look forward to cultivating many more enemies in my career on behalf of the Earth.
Overseas today, the residents of Reykjavik in Iceland are still reeling somewhat from an attack last night on their whaling industry.
They undid a few bolts and let the sea do the rest,
thereby sinking half of Iceland's whaling fleet in Reykjavik harbor. No one was injured.
The police in Iceland say the same people ripped apart this whaling station.
We served warning on Iceland last.
Paul Watson is telling the world they were his men, members of a whale conservation group called the Sea Shepherd Society.
We have acted as an unofficial policing body, the International Whaling Commission.
I think when you make people angry by a...
Greenpeace called the act sabotage.
He's like handed them a reason to retaliate with violence.
I was doing a talk show and a reporter says, Greenpeace has just condemned you as a terrorist. What's your response? So I said, oh, what do you expect from the Avon ladies in the environmental movement anyway? And so they never forgive me for that because it was a little too close to the truth.
If we don't have such people with extreme positions, then we will tend to be much more conservative in terms of where we fall.
We're never going to end up where the extremists in the animal rights movement want us to. You know, not eating meat, not wearing leather, not wearing any animal product. That's Shangri-La. I don't think they believe it, but they understand the necessity of establishing a revolutionary precedent.
And for that reason, I think that the animal rights people right now are the shock troops that are pushing our sensibilities, our sensitivities, much further than we would normally go.
Oh, these represent the whaling vessels, the outlaw whaling vessels that we have sunk.
He is behaving like a kind of action figure. And it plays on the psychology of a fairly large percentage of people who want a Superman in their mythology, who look up to that sort of thing. And that's why he attracts young people, because young people are even more susceptible to that idea that there are heroes and that there are saviors who are going to make the world better for them.
There's a negative and a positive side to that. Positive side is you get people to take risks that are needed in order to do our campaigns, and the negative side is that if people idolize you too much, then they discover that you're a human being. They sometimes get disappointed, you know.
Tonight we have pasta bake, French fries, some spinach and asparagus, and a big salad and a cake because it's the captain's birthday.
Crew actually made a little collection and got you some presents. Here is a bayonet from the Battle of Gallipoli.
Where did you steal this?
Well, Paul is actually a classic case of the cult of the personality.
Beautiful chart of Antarctica itself.
He has a bit of a Pied Piper syndrome where he attracts young people, young women, and young guys like he's the big leader.
So, happy birthday!
Okay.
Okay, you can break out the beer.
Looks like we're going to get Oakleys for everybody on board.
Yes! Sunglasses?
I'm growing my mullet right now.
Hey, that's
We've sold out now, man.
Paul has a huge, huge ego, and I don't say that in a bad way. Is he a narcissist? Absolutely. I remember when he said, look, I know I have an ego, but it has to be, because it gets me to where I need to go. But it's made him what he is. You know, I think if people grow up with perfect mom, perfect dad, they don't become as much. Like Paul, you know, had a really screwed up childhood, and now look at him.
I was the firstborn, and my mother was 20. I think my father was 22, and he ended up, he went to Korea, so he was in Korea for the first years of my life.
Now, as far as his father goes, you know, his father was a real son of a gun. He wasn't kind to the kids, and he certainly wasn't kind to his wife.
Well, yeah, he was, you know, very abusive towards my mother, very disciplinarian towards his kids, and just generally wasn't very nice. You know, he had left home. So my mother was a single mother with 6 kids, and we hadn't seen him for 2 years. And then when she died, he suddenly showed up and just pulled us off to Toronto, which was a bit of a culture shock. But at the same time, I think it was actually a beneficial thing, because otherwise I'd probably still be in that little fishing village just doing whatever people do in those places.
Maybe being brought up, you know, with no mother. You know, there's a side to Paul that is warm, but it's still a little guarded.
Death is a really, you know, people die, you know, you just have to accept that. I mean, you know, so when somebody dies, it's sort of like, it's just what you come to expect from everybody, really.
His father was trying to beat the creativity out of Paul. And finally, Paul just one day said, "You touch me again," you know.
He hit me, and I turned around and hit him back and just beat the hell out of him, and then I left and for good. But it was actually quite liberating having done that, because, see, I suddenly realized I was bigger than he was at that point. And so, you know, it got to the point where I wasn't going to take any more abuse from him. I knew when I was a child sitting on the docks in St. Andrews that that's what I wanted to do, was to go to sea and explore. I believe in the laws of ecology. That's my philosophy. It's sort of my religion, I guess. The 3 basic laws of ecology: diversity, interdependence, and finite resources. No species has ever survived by going against those laws, and we won't either. But that doesn't mean that the Earth won't survive. The Earth has survived worse things than us. I think that there's even hope for humans, but they have to radically change their perspective. We decided that we would take a stand in the Galapagos because, I mean, if we can't save any places profoundly beautiful and unique as the Galapagos, then how are we going to save anything else? We have a 5-year contract with the Galapagos to help them to patrol against illegal fishing, poachers.
lines in the water.
They got lines in the water? Get photographs of that. Get that on film.
Bien, tú tienes la oportunidad para hablar, Juárez, inmediatamente en el nombre del Parque Nacional de Galapagos.
Our intent is to support the national park and protection of the marine reserve. And because the National Park Rangers really have their hands tied behind their backs, they can't do their job because the Navy, which is completely corrupt, calls the shots here. Well, Pablo Salas, who's in charge of enforcement for the park, said that we busted more illegal fishing operations in 1 week than the Navy's done in years. So you don't have like charts, like good charts of Fernandina or something, things like that?
Well, Sirenia now is the ship Captain Paul Watson, he donated the ship to the Galapagos National Park.
Yeah, you can have all those. These are the ones here we'll use. We're always criticized for going after poor fishermen. Well, these poor fishermen are wiping out sharks and turtles and everything.
They're just examining the ship. They just went down on the fish.
And so I just find that people are always being used in that way to justify this ongoing destruction of the environment and other species. And you know what I find really bizarre about it is nobody really cares about those fishermen. They go to sea in boats that don't have safety equipment. 200 of them die every year. We don't think about those people. We don't care about those people, except when conservationists intervene, and then we say, oh, those conservationists are taking the jobs away from those poor people. As fisheries have collapsed on the mainland, people have come here because of the real lucrative fishery in sea cucumbers and shark fins and things that are being sold to the Far East. If you have shark fin soup at your wedding, then you're somebody. It doesn't taste like anything. They just boil it and add spices. Personally, I think that the occupation of fishermen is the most ecologically destructive occupation on this planet. The fisherman has the potential to destroy civilization as we know it. God, how much fish can they possibly pull out of there? Because of the fishermen's greed and excess, which is literally pulling every living thing out of the ocean and destroying it. And it's got to end. There's simply not enough fish in the ocean to continue to feed the demands of an ever-expanding human population. Tell the Zodiac that when they get up to him, we need a GPS read.
I have a family.
Yeah, what's going to happen in 20 years when there's no more fish for your family's kids? Your kids' what's going to happen then? When they come to Galapagos?
You're harassing us. We have no rights. I want the U.S. Coast Guard to come here. Now. You're harassing me and my crew.
Stop having an argument. Tell him the facts. Over.
Just make sure you tell him that he has been ordered by the National Park of Galapagos to remain where he is.
And I'll wait for the Sovereign. Over.
The Galapagos is really the Earth in microcosm. The problems are the same, especially increasing human population. And where the population has risen from, say, 8,000 15 years ago to nearly 35,000 now. And then on top of that, tourism has gone from 50,000 tourists a year to almost 300,000 tourists a year.
Welcome to the Galapagos, where fishermen rule and the Navy cowers in fear.
Respetemos la Reserva Marina.
We decided to go and help these park rangers that were being protested against by fishermen who wanted full exploitation of sea cucumbers.
Well, they stormed into the National Park office, and I've never anywhere in the world seen people with Molotov cocktails and clubs threatening a government office while the police and the military just stand there and watch them.
Some people say for years and years to come here.
Well, the fact is that the fisheries around the world are in such dire straits at this point that they're not going to last very much longer, certainly not at the level of exploitation that they're being subject to right now. One species of fish after another is being decimated.
There is no way we can keep living the way we are. There's no way we can't keep fishing out the oceans. We've already fished through 90% of many fish species, so there's nothing left.
As Jacques Cousteau said just before he died, the oceans are dying in our time. That's right, we've destroyed 90% of the fishes. Coral reefs in the entire planet will be gone in 20 years. That's an irreversible situation. That's the first major collapse of an ecosystem on the planet. People are really ecologically rather stupid. I mean, we don't realize that we just wipe out a couple of species here, we're gone. That's probably the big difference between myself as a marine conservationist and practically everybody else, is that I'm not really concerned about doing this for the good of our children or our children's children or future generations and everything like that. Which my concern is for the whales and for the sharks and for the fish and for the seals, for their interests, for their survival. And if we destroy the oceans, as we're doing, and the oceans die, then it's quite simple, we die. And I don't think people really understand that connection. No oceans, no civilization, no humanity.
The question is not if there will be a future for life on Earth. The question is, will humanity be a part of the future? The environmental movement is a war for the survival of humanity. Why should we be surprised that there are violent factions in the environmental and animal rights movement when there are violent factions of every other movement that existed or has ever existed? Social reform is a violent enterprise and always has been. The reality is that there has never been any significant social revolution ever achieved without violence. All revolutions are violent revolutions.
The Japanese do is they divide the hunting areas in annual areas. Area 3, Area 4, Area 5. They announced this year to be hunting in Area 3 and 4, which is basically from Melbourne to South Africa. We expect them to be in Area 5, which is basically from Melbourne to New Zealand.
That makes sense. How far away is that target?
6.8 miles. Well, it's moving at 9 knots.
That's what it says. I mean, if you're absolutely convinced that this is a ship, we could put a Zodiac in and go check it out.
Yo, Zodiac in the water right now.
Open up the doors, get the ladder ready.
Don't remember where we are also. This soup, it's really hard to find anything.
If we lose you, we'll have to let you know by radio. I can't hear a word you're saying. What? Got to supervise every step of the operation here.
They're ready to go. Where does this go? They had 2 down there.
Oh, they want 2. One of them's back
the
up.
engine room know they're going to slow down? They have to have this better organized so that people just don't jump in the boat. What's that object over there? An iceberg? You see it? Anybody got glasses on? You can probably see them from where they are. Zodiac, do you copy? Do you still have a visual?
We no longer have a visual.
Now then, you better come back.
For the ship.
I'm returning.
They didn't see it?
No, they went in a complete different direction.
Well, whatever ship that was, it was directly off our bow.
Well, they couldn't. They can't see them.
And they were like right behind us.
They said they couldn't see them.
I mean, everyone's so excited to find the Japanese that pretty much everything looks like a Japanese whaling ship. Usually it's just a piece of ice, but that doesn't stop us from finding about 3 or 4 Japanese whaling ships every day.
probably dozens of organizations around the world took up the cause of the whales.
So finally there was enough votes to make a decision to protect the whales.
In Brighton, England, the International Whaling Commission voted today to ban commercial whaling indefinitely starting in 1986. Japan and Norway not only voted against the ban, but strongly suggested they would openly defy it.
I really thought that now that the moratorium was in place, whaling would stop. Today, the IWC, I would say, is teetering at another crossroads.
We've seen a steady evolution in the International Whaling Commission, certainly since 1946. What I would really like to see is the IWC evolve into a whale conservation organization.
So when it comes to stopping whales, aren't you far more effective in what you're doing down the Southern Ocean by distracting the hunt each year?
Well, I think that we're more effective in the field, but ultimately it's going to have to be a worldwide body that's going to have to be in charge of whale conservation, and I think the IWC should evolve into that body.
You can see the water cannon on the top.
I see that.
Got a lot of practice in arresting people around here.
The Australian government has been unequivocal and outspoken on this question. Australia is opposed to whaling under special permit.
Japan. Basically, the problem is that we're dealing with Japan is they're a big economic bully. They get what they want.
Yes.
Japan, when it didn't get its way, began to recruit nations to its side. It drove a vote-buying campaign in the IWC, which recruited nations, most of them poor, and most of them indebted to Japan in some way or another, who came along to vote on Japan's side.
Tuvalu.
Yes.
Yes. Laos.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Japanese whaling fleet is an extremely violent institution that is causing incredible agony and death to the whales down in the Southern Ocean. These are highly complex, intelligent animals, and to kill them is murder.
We can talk about conservation and management of whales. We can talk about welfare of whales and animals. But we cannot talk about animal rights here because we don't share the same view.
The big challenge for humankind is whether we can continue to use those resources for the future without using them up. And the natural resources, many of them is renewable. It's like, hopefully, like our bank account. If you have enough money and the bank is producing the interest, you can just live on the interest without using your capital money. And this is the basic idea of sustainable use.
I have a feeling that whales are just part of a bigger issue that relates to the access that Japan has to fisheries in general around the world. And that they believe that if they concede on this one point, then they're going to have to concede on others.
If you start creating exemptions like whales, seal, cow, like India, or maybe elephants, some of the elephant species are actually abundant. And who knows what comes next.
Whales are dying and they're being killed illegally, and the nation of Japan is a criminal nation, and their criminal activities have to be shut down. Thank you.
This is a really interesting issue. Is it illegal? I think Paul Watson's interpretation probably wouldn't stand up in a court. I think what he's doing is making a political statement rather than a strictly legal one there. It gives him some grounds to take the action that he wishes to take.
Greenpeace found the Japanese.
Yeah, so it's about 300 miles from where we are right now.
Oh man, that's great.
And that came from Greenpeace then?
We just got a call from our office and they said, this is the coordinates. Greenpeace found them. Paul hung up, went directly to the charts and started plotting the course along with Peter.
How did they know?
How do they know?
Yeah.
Because they got all kinds of money.
Do we have their location now?
They're back over here and we're over here. So Paul says it's a day and a half. So, great. So we're on our way.
Great.
There's a research.
Yeah.
Captain doesn't want to stop anymore. We want to go straight in, so when we get there, we'll put the 3 Zodiacs in the water and the helicopter in the air. We have smoke bombs on board. We're going to use those. We have water cannons. We're going to use those. We have butyric acid. We're going to use it. Yesterday they were whaling. Yesterday they killed 7 or 8 whales. Hopefully by tomorrow evening we'll be there, which will obviously piss the Japanese fleet off tremendously.
The harpoon vessels are on both sides of the Nishan Maru, just over the horizon. We get about 5 miles away or 4 miles away. We launch the Zodiacs.
Basically saying,
I don't know if there's an iceberg or a ship way out there.
You can see them. It's 4 or 5 ships.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's it. We got it. All hands, wake everybody up. Sure. Okay, go.
Our shop is at 11 o'clock.
Say hey.
Bring them on.
Immediately we came onto them and we threw butyric acid on their decks, which is a horrendous stink bomb.
Only way you got to clear through. Only way you know for sure you got to hit it.
They should have run like hell when they saw us on the radar.
And that stopped all the work right away. Then we went alongside and we were able to nail plates to the outflow units where the blood comes into the water from the cleansing deck, so we can back that up.
Our Zodiac's in their water spray right now.
We also were able to put fouling lines in to foul the props, and we stopped one of the boats that way.
Somebody push me. Okay. Come on, Chris.
Yeah, Chris! Oh my God, that's so funny.
Your turn, Paul.
It's cold, bro.
Ever since we confronted them, they started speeding up. So now they're doing full speed, heading due north, which is really strange. They're still doing 14 knots, which means they haven't whaled all day. But as soon as they start whaling again, then they'll have to slow down and we'll catch up. But as long as we can keep them on the run, you can guarantee no whales are being killed.
They've gone almost to the opposite side.
Did they kill any whales?
Not yet. I think they've probably done this on purpose to get as far away from us as possible. Oh well. No whistling on the bridge. Bad luck, you know. Who's whistling on the bridge? Not supposed to whistle on a bridge of a ship.
Is that a new rule?
It's always been a rule, hundreds of years old.
Is it bad luck?
Yeah, very.
Whistle up a storm. Don't do it.
I've got a new target that appears to be moving.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's got to be here. It's 12 miles.
Yeah, it's out there. It's from where you're at, from where I'm at, about 11 o'clock.
For sure, you can see that.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas. That's a beautiful Christmas present.
Nishimaru, これはファルモです。グラスビット。恥ずかしいよ。
They're gonna answer you.
No way. I just called him a murderer and called him dishonorable.
They're not going to respond.
No, they're not.
Brendan, speak, Captain. Random?
No, we're going to try and follow their prop right now. That's the first thing we're going to do. Ram that thing, we'll sink.
It's not dangerous, dude.
It's pretty dangerous out there right now.
The smoke.
What?
You want to use this on the aft deck so we can cover everybody up?
Wind's not going to allow us to use that.
No.
I don't see how we can get it on the deck of that boat. No, I don't want anybody up there. That's the best thing to do right now. Just as we're approaching the bow, put it in. That'd be plenty of time. Is there a buoy on the end?
Yes.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, on
So
both
just
ends.
as we come across, just as we start to come across, that's when we got to put it. Otherwise, we'll see what we're doing.
Okay.
Try and keep it out of sight of these guys, because they're not going to let us have a second chance.
Catch him, Alex.
Maybe we should pull it up close alongside before cutting in.
It looks like it's going up on 6. Okay, we'll keep it up research.
A lot of research.
I think they saw it. I like turned away. I'm going to be doing another piece of wine. They are in research too, together. We've got everything roll like crazy. It's 9.6.
Can't go any faster. Look at that, they come right out of the water.
Speed 6 in. I think as soon as that we're
Just past the research thing, it'd be the best time to do it, but you wouldn't have time to really speed up. We're going to collision course, we're going to pass them. We have the right of way. That's the rules of the road. We have the right of way. A little further more, everybody's going to catch up with us. A little further north. I think you can do it now. Be close to that. Right in front. Yeah.
Okay, back there. Somebody in the water.
Go for it. He's turning. He's turning away. He saw us deploy the line. Shit. I thought we were going to cross him, was it? This is the Farley Moat. We're no protest ship. Now get out of here.
We're going 13. If we see him again, we will not get close enough. They'll do exactly the same.
There's only one solution to this problem. It's a faster ship.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Esperanza could do it, but we can't. And they won't.
Esperanza doesn't have this crew. Esperanza can't hold a candle to.
If they would have T-boned us, you're talking serious damage. And 10 times that way would probably just splice the ship in half, or just break it right in half. You'll go down in a matter of seconds.
Looking off across its bow, my heart was beating rapidly. It was thrilling for me, actually, because I never felt more alive and more true and pure of my actual self. If my death was then in that moment, it would have meant something, and I wouldn't have just died for nothing. I would have died for something.
But, the lesson I've learned is that we found the key to stopping them, and that is we just have to keep up with them. Unfortunately, we don't have the ship to do that. We're going to have to come back next year with a faster ship, and I think that if we can stay on their tail, they won't kill a single whale, because no whales have been killed while we've been around. The fact is, we have to retire the Farley Mowat. And it costs a lot of money to retire a vessel, so the best way to do it is to get the government to do that for us. So we put the ship up there to oppose the seal hunt in Canada, really to be seized. I decided to do the Brer Rabbit sort of strategy and sent in this Farley Mowat as the tar baby, really.
The ship's captain and first officer were arrested on charges of violating federal marine regulations, and the head of the organization is calling it an act of war.
If you storm a vessel under force of arms and steal all the property, that's an act of piracy. So we look on this as a ransom. We'll pay it in doubloons.
$10,000 in toonies and bills, put up by the ship's namesake, author Farley Mowat.
So I said to Paul, I'll stand bail for you. They held the ship, and they thought they had won a great victory.
I don't even know what the big deal is. We had a group who are known around the world for causing all kinds of trouble. We had them come into our waters. We had them break our laws, and we're going to sit back and do nothing? You know, not at all.
I think they're paying $4,000 a day to watch and secure the vessel. All the women that I've been involved with a rare exception, have come to me, you know, and wanted to be involved with me, which is fine, but then they want me to change. Well, that's one of the reasons that I don't stay married, because I've never put those relationships before what I do.
Paul went to Australia and he met another woman. And that kind of ended. I mean, he just fell head over heels in love with another woman. And that was pretty much it. It was done and it was over. There was nothing more painful in my life than the breakup of Paul, because I really thought that I would die with him. I thought, you know, I wouldn't mind going out in battle with Paul, you know, and sinking to the bottom of the ocean if that was what was necessary to save a species. I guess I thought that, you know, there was too much connection between us that anything would have ever happened like it did to us. You know, that he wouldn't have treated me like he treats other people. I thought it would have played out better for me.
But, you know, it just got to the point where we're just going different ways, really.
the beginning of the 2009 whaling season in the Antarctic. There's whales right off their bow.
During Operation Migaloo, our last campaign to Antarctica, we took a film crew from Animal Planet, and they're doing a 7-part series called Whale Wars.
He is a man who will die for the whales, and expects his crew to do the same. If I was afraid...
Whale Wars has certainly given us a higher profile. Well, the first season of Whale Wars was the highest rated Animal Planet show of all time, and it's reached literally millions of people around the world.
Hardest working person I know, also one of the humblest people I know, Captain Watson.
Thank you. I'd just like to briefly explain one of the reasons why I do what I do.
We got asked to do a benefit for the Sea Shepherds in the 80s, and I started paying attention to what Paul Watson was doing.
And as I looked up into this eye as it rose above me, an eye the size of my fist, what I saw in that eye changed my life forever. Because I saw understanding. I saw that the whale understood what we were trying to do, protect his spawn.
And I felt like it was part of my responsibility to help the energy of this organization exist and carry on.
But I think that every year we go down there, the Japanese whalers become more and more aggressive because they're becoming more and more desperate. And it's a very dangerous situation because they are trying to kill us. Now, we have to get stronger every year. We need a fast boat. And we're looking at getting this vessel, the Earth Race, which there's pictures of around here, which looks sort of like a spaceship. But it does 55 knots, and it just set the world record for going around the world in 60 days. And that is the perfect vessel for us to block those harpoons. So we want to go down there with a navy, with a whale's navy. And I think we can do that. We just need the resources to do it because we're fighting for the future.
Overall strategy with the Japanese is to defeat them economically. It's the only thing they'll understand. If anybody thinks they're going to change the world through appealing to the morality of human beings, then they're not going to get very far. Humans are not moral. Our vessel, the Farley Mowat, was too slow. So it was a priority concern after that campaign was to secure a faster ship, which we were able to do.
We're trying to make Earth Race like a stealth boat. It's made of carbon, so it's already got a low radar signature. And we've put on the special black paint, which has got carbon through it, and it diffuses radar signals. So it allows us to sneak around at night. And by having the boat black, it also makes the boat very hard to see in low light conditions. So Earth Race has become a stealth boat. Things will certainly escalate down in Antarctica this year, and bring it on, the Japanese are going to be pissed off. We can hopefully stay down there continuously for the whole 4-month season.
I hope to see in print one day, Steve Irwin stops whaling vessel. Wouldn't that be a great thing to see the headlines of?
We're now very closely associated with Steve's organization. Steve was a supporter of Sea Shepherd, and that's why we named the ship the Steve Irwin. That's a good example of someone who was able to reach, tens of millions of people through television.
Paul's had a strategy of embarrassing those who are willing to violate law, violate international standards, violate common ethics and common sense, and expose them on the international media. And a lot of people don't like that.
They are playing God, and whatever they do, they think that's something the rest of the world have to accept. And that's a very dangerous state of mind, I think. If he is really a person he claims to be, worrying about people, worrying about nature, he shouldn't come back to the Antarctic this year. He's just collecting the publicity.
You never retreat. You never surrender. You just keep pushing. We're going to drive the Japanese out of the Southern Ocean. It's a strategy of attrition, lasting them out, sticking in there longer than they can. And every year we get stronger, every year they get weaker. So we're winning this. The book to compare what I do would be the Odyssey. It's just this never-ending voyage that, that goes through all these different trials and tribulations trying to attain its goal.
It goes right back to the first Greenpeace campaign. Bob Hunter always had a copy of the I Ching with him. And one of the main phrases in the I Ching is that perseverance furthers. And no one can fault Paul on that count.
I mean, I've never met someone with such a commitment to a cause as Paul has. He will not give up on this. He'll not give up, even if it does eventually mean his death.
I don't know if I can ever see Paul retire. When I first met Paul, he said, maybe by the time I'm 50, I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll start writing books. But I don't think that you can drag him off the ocean.
Watson is a hero of mine, I have to say. He's been vastly criticized, and I'm not going to say he's a perfect person by any means. I could give you a list of things I'd like him to change. It's incredible that he's alive, given the circumstances that he's been in. When he goes down to the Antarctic, it's not just the whalers that he's confronting, it's the totality of the harsh, unfriendly Arctic environment. When he's in those ice fields, and he's not in an icebreaker. He's just in a boat with ordinary steel hull.
I think if I could all do it differently, I'd be far more aggressive than I've been. There's so many opportunities where I think that if I knew what I knew now, I could have got away with more back then, so I would have been taking a more aggressive stance.
Fuck. Whoa. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Wow. They hit it?